Reports to you, TopVelocity.net, 3x pitch BioMetrics here. Brandon Rollinson from 3x Velocity Camp. We'll be looking at the hip angles coming out of leg drive. Trying to get just before leg drive. So right there, we can see right rotation, red check, 6 degrees internal. We want to be external, so we want to be like 25 minus 25 in that external position, holding torsion. Hip abduction at 18, we'd want to go more forward and down the same rate and get into 35, 40. This should be the point where we've got good hip abduction because we're in good hip flexion as well, moving down, loading into that hip, holding torsion, but still trying to get that drive leg force vector linear, the ankle to knee. The trunk here is leaning back a little aggressively. I'd want to keep the trunk a little bit more neutral. So probably because Brandon is not loaded far down enough with the hips, he's leaning back to try to overcompensate by throwing the trunk forward later on. Let's see where the drive leg ankle to knee flexion is. You can see the ankle yellow check is at 19, so good dorsiflexion, knee flexion at 52. Average there. Hip flexions at let's go back and look at that hip flexion. Hip flexions at 21. Also too, looking at the trunk position to pelvis position, the pelvis is at 11 back, so the posterior chain's really not being loaded well here. You're actually in a posterior pelvic position. Want to be a little bit more neutral to anterior and get into that glute hamstring load. Trunk isn't too far forward, so that looks good. Let's go through leg drive. We can see really not a lot of leg drive, just rotation into front foot. Even though with that rotation, some hip to shoulder separation is coming out of it, decent hip to shoulder separation as we can see. But we might have some early trunk rotation. So hip to shoulder separation is 46, which would be good, but look as we go into front foot, watch the glove side as we stabilize front foot. You can see the glove side is coming down with the front foot, so that's early trunk rotating. So then I'm concerned about hyperangulation or arm drag. At that moment, it's hard to get it exactly at that moment. Okay. So not a lot of drive. It's basically rotating into hip to shoulder separation, but with early trunk rotation. So you probably have some, more scap loading as we go forward, or just a lot of thoracic mobility, even with early tucking the glove. So if we look at the hip position, pretty open here, but more linked to going early, not building a lot of power at the hip. So we're separated, just not a lot of energy at this position, not a lot of coil at this position. So as we watch the trunk, let's see the trunk orientations. So I'm going to put on the chest. You see the trunk is 25 back, which is good. And the hip or the side bend is only 2 degrees. So I think the only thing is that glove should still be in line, and ultimately we'd have more power and drive into this position. So as he moves forward, you can see at this point trunk is starting to open up. And I think because the arm gets an early external rotation, we don't get a lot of hyperangulation. But the problem is at the point of maximum external rotation, we have no forward trunk tilt. Normally a high velocity pitcher, if I could put on, I'm going to do the drawing tool. If this is where the trunk currently is, this is where a high velocity pitcher would be. Someone like Cody Hall in our programs would be here with that external rotation. So, I thought that would clear it out. I just got to clear the whole thing. So not much leg power. So when the back leg just rotated, didn't give enough momentum to drive the trunk forward. And then the early trunk rotation just kind of added to that. So what we're going to see is, as he goes into pitch release, we're going to see a lot of contralateral tilt, extreme amounts. So we see 43 degrees. We don't want to go past 25. So if I go back to that drawing tool, if this is 0 degrees of the trunk, this would be 25. This is, 45 where he is. So we only want to go right here. So that means not much trunk energy, so used a lot of rotational energy. You can see that trunk really isn't barely forward, even though, it's it's 25 degrees, but it looks like it's almost in a neutral position if he wasn't leaning glove side so much. Front leg doesn't even really get extended into pitch release. So not a lot of trunk power, so a lot of rotation in there. Rotation, even with good hip to shoulder separation of front foot, but there was no linear energy, so the trunk just kept spinning and rotating. So we got to work on getting that back leg abducted, get it holding torsion, more forward and down the same rate with the hips, more power, leg power, and the front foot. Stop the early trunk rotating or early glove tuck, and get that trunk to start moving forward as opposed to spinning off. That would be the key. That should be a big jump in velocity as he develops that.